Hi there, a quick video. What I'm currently doing with my Japanese black pine in preparation for or prior to winter dormancy. So we're still in autumn, and as you probably already know, autumn is when material or girth or thickness of the tree is takes place, and so it's a great time of the year with pines to help to accelerate the thickening of their trunks. And we can do this by using a technique called cage wiring, and that's essentially where you put wire around the trunk of your tree, and then the tree lays on tissue, and in so doing it increases the thickness of the trunk. This happens quite rapidly during autumn, so it's a good time to do this. If you've already put wire onto the trunks of your trees, then it's a good time to just check on them and see if there's considerable wire bite already happening, and if there is, to remove that wire and then to reapply new wire. Or otherwise, if your trunks haven't already got wire on, now is a good time to put the wire onto the tree to take advantage of the season that lies ahead. So in front of me I have a pine, Japanese black pine, which doesn't currently have wire on, so I'm just quickly going to put wire onto this one. I am using aluminium, or I will be using aluminium wire. You can use copper or aluminium. Aluminium is just cheaper, and essentially this wire is just going to remain on for the next few months, and then it will be removed again. I also try to use, as far as the thickness of the wire that you select goes, I try to use the thickest wire that I can, which can be applied without damaging bark of the tree. So just cut a length of wire, sharpen the edge so that it's easier to stick it through into the soil, and then insert it into the soil so that it is anchored, and then wind the wire around the trunk. If you've done this before and there's areas where the wire bit in previously, then you can wire next to that, but wire in the same direction as you did before. Don't change the direction of the wiring. And we're really focusing, depending on the size of the tree that you're wanting ultimately. These are going to be shohin trees, so I'm only really interested in the bottom few centimeters of the trunk and getting that as thick as possible. If I look at another example, you'll see that this tree, the wire has bitten in quite considerably, and at this point in time I would want to remove it. So it's bitten in quite a lot. You could remove the wire before it gets to this stage, but it's fine so long as you remove it quite carefully, and if you do expose any cambium, to seal that immediately. This section of the trunk is actually a little bit thicker than the bottom section, so it's important that we correct this, otherwise we're going to have a reverse taper remaining on this trunk. So this area which is bitten in quite considerably, I'm going to remove the wire there, and then I might leave the wire on this first section of the trunk. Otherwise I'll remove the wire entirely and then maybe just rewire the tree again, but only on this section. So when using the pliers to remove the wire, try and stay to the same path as you would have taken before. In other words, try and take it off as straight as possible to minimize the amount of damage that you might inflict on the bark of the tree. And sometimes it's better actually just to cut the wire and just work it backwards like that. Removed a little bit of bark there, so we'll just have to seal that. So you'll see in this area you don't see any green, so that is not necessary to seal there. Actually nowhere, but sometimes when you remove the wire you'll actually see the green cambium below that. Now this will disappear within a year or two, bearing in mind that this is a very young material, and we're a number of years away from being anywhere with it. So the way that the sap will flow up into the sacrifice leader here will cause this to thicken up. And now with the wire removed, the tree can begin to yield this, and in so doing it will fatten up as well. This is one that had very severe wire bite, but the same if not more extreme, and you can see how this area has healed over quite extensively already, and this is in the same season. What's nice about this little tube of cut paste is that you can be very deliberate about the application. You can really apply it precisely with where you want it to be. I'm just going to cover that area that was damaged a bit, and the callus can form below it. When you start wiring the trunk, it's a good idea to start as low as possible so that the biting in can occur as low down to the soil as possible, because you don't want to create the reverse taper effect that I was showing you earlier. And this way it's also great because it gives you an opportunity to anchor the wire very well against the trunk and in the soil, so that you can, because you want this wire to be very tight against the trunk. Otherwise the tree has to thicken up somewhat before it actually makes contact with the wire, and then at that point it will thicken up. The thickening accelerates. Just this section again, focusing on this area. As you can see, this will eventually be removed, and the future tree will be created from possibly this bud, or should I say the trunk line will be created from this bud, or possibly this growth here. You can see this tree has got a number of branches very low down on the trunk, so this is great also as sacrifices for thickening up the trunk. So you can use sacrifice branching in conjunction with the cage wiring method that I'm showing you. I get this low down branching because I treat all of my all of these pines have been grown from seed, and I treat them as cuttings. I mentioned earlier on that it's advisable to use the thickest wire you can. So when the trees are younger, you'll probably be using, say in the second year of growth, maybe something like a 2mm wire. And then in the third year of growth, maybe something thicker, possibly 3mm. There's no rule there or guideline. As I say, it's just got to be as thick as possible. The thicker the wire, the better, because it's not going to cut in to the tree as easily as something thin will. But on the other hand, you also don't want to damage the bark of the tree too much. So use the thickest wire that you can apply safely without damaging the tree. So I think this is probably about a 4mm. You need to push it into the soil as close to the base of the tree as possible, so that you get it against the trunk at a better angle. And then, as I said, you want to get it as tight as you possibly can against the trunk, so that thickening will occur quicker than if it was loose and the tree would have to grow or develop some before it actually makes contact with the wire. And ideally you don't want to run the wire along the same groove as it was in before. You go just next to it, but importantly in the same direction as you used before. Don't crisscross the wire. Also, the angles of the wire as you're applying it is really immaterial. You're using the wire for, well, when the tree is younger, obviously you can use, when you're putting shape into it, you can, then you need to bear in mind the angles that you're able to perform the bends that you need. But at this stage, I've already put those bends into the trunk, so it's not necessary at this point in time. The sole purpose of the wire is to thicken up the trunk. So there you want to use very uneven bends because you don't want it to look like something spiraling up the tree. Working with thicker wire, it's sometimes easier to use a pair of pliers. It gives you just easier to manipulate the wire than using your fingers. You're just able to get tighter coils. What I've noticed as well is that buds will very often form on the lower side of the wire bite. So I guess it's due to the restriction that's caused by the wire and a buildup of sap and hormones, and it produces buds at that point. So in fact it actually helps to give future styling options as well. Or you can develop those buds into sacrifice branches, which also help to accelerate the thickening of the tree. This is a good example of thickening, uneven thickening. So in this area of the trunk, we have a fair amount of thickening happening, but we actually want some more of it lower down just to create a better taper. And this part of the trunk is probably thick enough for the moment. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the wire from this probably the first half or the top half, and leave it at the bottom. So I try not to disturb that, and then that can carry on thickening, and then possibly in spring I can remove the wire entirely and then possibly wire it again, or just allow it some time to heal. All right, so I'm going to leave the wire at this point so that it still makes contact here. If I remove it too far, it'll start loosening further back, so I won't get the thickening that I need or want. So I'll just leave it. I'm not going to cut the wire because I can just reuse it in future. So just bend it out the way so that it can't hurt me if I'm walking past. And but then, as I say, to leave this wire on the lowest section, so that can carry on doing its job. Okay, that concludes this little session on thickening up your pine trunks. I hope you've learned something from it. I hope you apply the techniques that you've seen to your own trees. Thank you very much for watching.